The scream shattered the African dawn, echoing through the sanctuary like a siren of fear. Rebecca froze. Her 9-year-old son was inside the enclosure, alone, with a 400-pound silverback gorilla. For one endless heartbeat, the world stood still. Then the boy collapsed. His small body hit the ground, motionless, breathless as dust rose around him. Every instinct screamed to run, to save him. But what the gorilla did next would challenge science, silence cynics, and prove that love remembers, even when separated by species, time, and every rule written about the wild. Witnesses later called it a miracle, one of the most emotional animal rescue moments ever caught on camera. But this wasn't luck. This was destiny, born 15 years earlier, when Rebecca made a decision that destroyed her marriage, her reputation, and nearly her sanity, choosing to raise a dying infant gorilla the world had already given up on. His name was Bako, a 3-pound survivor found beside his mother's lifeless body, another victim of poachers who saw trophies where life once breathed. Everyone told Rebecca to hand him over, to let nature take its course. Instead, she brought him home. They called her reckless. They called her delusional. But time would call her something else entirely. The woman who proved that compassion could defy instinct and that the human-animal bond is far stronger than anyone dares to believe. Night after night, Rebecca sang lullabies to that fragile orphan, watching his chest rise and fall, praying he'd see another sunrise. When the world doubted, she believed. When experts warned, she held on tighter. Through every tear, every sleepless night, every whispered promise, something unexplainable took root between them. Something that blurred the line between human and animal, caretaker and child, logic and love. It was this bond, impossible, fragile, eternal, that would one day turn into the most heart-touching animal story ever told. And now, 15 years later, as the gorilla stood over her unconscious son, that same connection would face its ultimate test. Because sometimes in the wild, love doesn't forget, it fights back. 15 years earlier, before the scream that would change everything, the jungle had already tested Rebecca's courage. She found the infant gorilla clinging to his dead mother, crying soundlessly in the humid air. The poachers had vanished, leaving only footprints, spent shells, and the echo of violence that still hung in the trees. The baby weighed less than 3 pounds. His heartbeat was faint, his tiny hands shaking. Most rescuers would have called a facility. Rebecca didn't. She wrapped him in her jacket, pressed him to her chest and whispered, "You're safe now." That was the moment everything began, the first spark of an impossible human-animal bond that would one day define both of their lives. She named him Bako, meaning firstborn. Each night she fed him warm milk from a dropper, humming soft lullabies until his trembling stopped. It wasn't science, it was instinct. Every breath he took felt borrowed, every sunrise a small victory against the odds. Vets warned her, "Infant." Gorillas don't survive without mothers. Their immune systems fail, their hearts give up. But Rebecca refused to surrender. This wasn't just a wildlife rescue, it was a promise to life itself. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The little gorilla began to thrive. He laughed at shadows, clung to her hair, mimicked her voice. By 6 months, he wouldn't sleep unless her hand rested on his back. That kind of attachment, experts said, was dangerous. He'll never adapt to the wild. You're making him human. Maybe she was. But in her heart she knew what they couldn't measure. Love heals better than medicine. The world soon found out. A short video of Bako playing peekaboo with Rebecca went viral. Millions watched, cried, debated. Half called her an angel, the rest, a fool. "You can't tame nature," they wrote. But Rebecca wasn't trying to tame him, she was trying to save him, and deep down, she feared they might all be right. What happens when love becomes the cage? By the time Bako turned 2, he was 60 pounds of muscle and mischief. A beautiful contradiction, wild strength wrapped in tenderness. But nature doesn't pause for emotion. The board demanded a decision, either teach him control or surrender him forever. And that's when Rebecca made a vow that would rewrite her destiny, one that would cost her everything she had, except the one thing she refused to lose: his trust. The following months changed everything. Rebecca turned her small sanctuary into a classroom for the impossible, a school where a human and a young gorilla would learn how to coexist. Bako's strength was growing faster than her courage could keep up. A playful tug could bruise her arm for days. One swing of his arm could break bones. The board gave her 6 months to teach him restraint. Failure meant separation. Success? Nobody believed it was possible. But Rebecca didn't believe in limits. She believed in love. Each morning began the same. Rebecca entered the enclosure slowly, never making sudden moves. "Gentle," she'd whisper, pressing her palm flat against her chest, the gesture that would become their secret language. Bako watched, curious. When he mirrored her, she smiled. Then came the reward: a piece of fruit, a gentle hug, the warmth of approval. Day after day, repetition built trust. It wasn't just training. It was communication beyond words, proof that the human-animal bond wasn't fantasy. It was real and fragile and breathtaking. Within months, something remarkable happened. During play, Bako accidentally knocked over a bucket and froze, waiting to see her reaction. Rebecca simply shook her head and said softly, "Gentle." The gorilla lowered his eyes, reached out, and brushed her cheek with his fingertips, so delicately it brought her to tears. It was the first moment she realized he understood empathy, that this wasn't about obedience, it was about compassion. About choosing tenderness when power would be easier. Word spread. Videos of their interaction captivated millions online. People called it a miracle of emotion, a living proof of animal intelligence. Scientists debated it, psychologists analyzed it, but those who watched simply felt it. The warmth, the purity, the silent echo of love that crossed the species divide. This was more than a gorilla rescue story. It was a mirror reflecting the best of humanity back to itself. But success comes with a price. Fame brought attention Rebecca never asked for. Journalists camped outside the sanctuary. Tour companies offered thousands for close encounters. Some activists accused her of cruelty for keeping Bako in captivity. Others threatened her life for loving too deeply. She started to wonder if saving him had doomed them both. Then, one morning, she found Bako sitting by the fence, staring into the horizon where the wild gorillas roamed free. His eyes carried a question she wasn't ready to answer. And for the first time in years, Rebecca realized, maybe love isn't just about holding on, maybe it's about knowing when to let go. The day Rebecca decided to let Bako go felt like walking into her own heartbreak. The rehabilitation program began on a Tuesday morning, drenched in rain, a gray sky mourning what she was about to lose. The transfer crate sat open in the truck, lined with blankets she had sewn herself. Bako sensed something was wrong. He clung to her leg, eyes wide with confusion, emitting low whimpers that pierced straight through her chest. "You have to learn the wild," she whispered, voice breaking. "I can't teach you that, my love. I can only love you enough to let you go." Every instinct begged her to stop, to take him home, to protect him from a world that had already taken so much. But some wildlife rescues end not with reunion, but with surrender. She kissed his forehead, stepped back and watched as the truck drove away, taking her heart with it. At the rehabilitation center, Bako sat motionless for days. He refused food, refused to explore, refused to forget. Rebecca watched through the cameras as he stayed near the gate where she'd left him. Every hour felt like punishment. "He's processing abandonment," said Dr. Amara, the lead primatologist. "It's normal." But Rebecca couldn't accept that word. There was nothing normal about watching love starve itself in silence. On the 4th day, a juvenile female approached Bako, offering a branch of leaves. He ignored her at first. She persisted, placing it near him and backing away. Minutes passed. Then Bako reached out, picked up the branch and ate. The other gorilla squealed with joy. A fragile bridge had formed. By sunset, they were sitting side by side, Rebecca's tears blurred the monitor. He was adapting, healing, moving forward. It was everything she had hoped and everything she feared. Weeks passed. Bako learned to forage, to climb, to live without human hands guiding him. He even challenged the dominant silverback once and survived. Rebecca realized something painful. He didn't need her anymore. He had crossed back into the world he was born for. And though it shattered her, she also understood that love had done its job. It had given him wings. Before the final release, she broke every rule. Late at night, she entered his enclosure one last time. The forest was quiet. Bako looked at her and didn't move. Then, with infinite gentleness, he reached out his massive hand and touched her face. They stayed like that. No words, just breath and memory. She whispered, "If you ever need me, I'll find a way." Neither of them could know how soon that promise would be tested. Years passed like mist burning off under the African sun. Rebecca threw herself into her work, building sanctuaries across the continent and becoming a voice for wildlife conservation. Newspapers called her the woman who raised a gorilla. Documentaries labeled her a living legend of compassion. But behind every accolade there was silence. Nights still came with phantom sounds, branches snapping, low hoots that her heart swore belonged to Bako. Success had replaced presence, but not peace. Then unexpectedly, life offered her another miracle. His name was Samuel. The child arrived small, loud, and full of the same defiant energy she'd once seen in Bako's eyes. Holding him for the first time, Rebecca understood a truth she'd never dared to admit. Letting go hadn't broken her, it had prepared her. All those years of saving others had finally taught her how to love without fear. But motherhood, like the wild, has its own storms. She checked Samuel's breathing 15 times a night. The same fear that once protected Bako now imprisoned her son. Daniel, her husband, was kind and steady, but even he noticed the shadows returning. "You're terrified of losing again," he said softly. She wanted to deny it, but couldn't. Every scraped knee, every cough, every goodbye triggered memories of jungles, crates, and promises whispered to a gorilla under moonlight. So she sought help. Therapy, prayer, reflection. Slowly, she learned that pain wasn't her enemy. Fear was. When Samuel turned 5, Rebecca showed him videos of the young silverback gorilla she'd once raised. The boy's eyes widened. "That's Bako?" he asked. "Did he remember you?" Rebecca hesitated. "I think so," she said quietly. "Maybe he still does." Samuel smiled in that simple, innocent way only children can. "Then he loves you, because love remembers." Those words pierced deeper than he could ever know. Because somewhere, miles away, in the heart of a distant forest, Bako, the once orphaned gorilla, turned. Protector was about to prove that a mother's promise never dies, and that some connections are written not in blood but in memory. Years later, when Samuel turned 7, Rebecca made a decision that stirred old ghosts. She would take him to Africa, to show him the world she'd fought to protect, the forests where wildlife rescue was more than a mission. It was faith in motion. Daniel hesitated. "He's too young," he warned, but Rebecca smiled. So was Bako when the world tested him. The flight felt like traveling backward through time. As the plane descended over endless green canopies, Rebecca's chest tightened. Every tree, below whispered memories. The sanctuary staff greeted her like family, and Samuel wandered wide-eyed, absorbing everything. When they met a troop of habituated gorillas during an observation hike, the boy stood frozen. One juvenile female crept close, her gaze curious, gentle. Samuel didn't flinch, he simply smiled. "They're not scary," he whispered. "They're beautiful." Rebecca felt her throat close. That's exactly what she'd said the first time she saw Bako breathe. For days they explored reserves, filmed educational clips, and spoke with rangers who still remembered her name. Everywhere she went, someone mentioned the gorilla rescue that had changed everything, the story of Bako, the miracle survivor. At night, Samuel begged for stories. "Tell me when he was a baby again," he'd say, eyes glowing in the dim light. Rebecca told him about the lullabies, the bruises, the lessons of gentleness, and the promise, always the promise. On their final morning, they drove past a sign Rebecca hadn't expected to see again. Bako Conservation Reserve, protected habitat, restricted access. Her hands tightened on the wheel. Samuel noticed. "That's his home, isn't it?" She nodded, unable to speak. "Can we go?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, baby. He's wild now. He deserves his freedom." The boy frowned. "But if you loved him, he'll remember you. That's how love works." The words hit her like thunder, because deep down, Rebecca knew he was right. Some memories don't fade. They wait. Somewhere in that forest, a silverback still carried the ghost of her voice, the echo of lullabies, the imprint of trust. And as the clouds rolled over the horizon, a storm began to gather. A storm that would soon bring every part of her past roaring back to life. On the 8th day of their trip, the family drove toward Bako's reserve. Rebecca had avoided that road for years, afraid the memories would swallow her whole. Now, her son's laughter filled the jeep, chasing away silence she'd carried too long. Grace, the reserve director, greeted them at the gates. "He's thriving," she said with a smile. "Bako leads a small group now. Strong, healthy, even expecting a baby soon." Rebecca felt pride and sorrow collide inside her chest. "He's built a life," she whispered. They hiked through thick forest until Grace stopped them on a wooden platform overlooking a clearing. Below, sunlight spilled through the canopy. And there he was, a giant of muscle and memory, his silver back gleaming like armor. "Bako!" Rebecca's breath caught. Samuel froze, eyes wide. "Mum," he whispered, "that's him, isn't it?" She nodded, tears already falling. For 2 hours, they watched in reverent silence. Bako moved with a calm authority, leading his family, gentle yet powerful. Then suddenly he looked up, straight toward the observation deck. Their eyes met. Rebecca's heart stopped. The years vanished. For a moment, there was no glass, no time, no distance, just recognition, a spark that said, "I remember you." And then something unimaginable happened. Samuel cupped his hands and hummed the lullaby Rebecca had once sung to Bako as a baby, the same melody that had bridged fear and faith. Everyone froze. Below, the gorilla's ears twitched. He turned, listening. Then, in a sound that would later make scientists debate for years, Bako answered. A deep, rhythmic call, not a copy, but an echo. A memory made flesh. "Mum." "He remembers," Samuel whispered, his voice trembling with awe. Tears streamed down Rebecca's face. Grace covered her mouth in disbelief. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world itself held still, honoring the moment when love reached across the divide between human and wild. But in that fragile silence, one choice shattered everything. Samuel moved. Before anyone could stop him, he climbed over the railing and began to descend, straight toward the gorilla that remembered his mother's song. The forest fell silent. Every breath on the platform stopped as Samuel reached the ground. The boy stood small against the immensity of the clearing, his heartbeat echoing louder than the wind. Rebecca's scream tore through the air. "Samuel, stop!" But it was too late. He walked forward, slow, steady, fearless, toward the 400-pound silverback gorilla that could end his life in a heartbeat. Bako turned. His posture stiffened, muscles rippling under scarred fur. The other gorillas backed away, sensing danger. From above, rangers raised tranquilizer rifles waiting for the command, but Rebecca's voice cut through the chaos. "No guns! Not yet!" Her feet hit the ground running, Daniel close behind. Time fractured into flashes, Samuel's trembling hands, the earth vibrating beneath each of Bako's steps, the sound of her own pulse pounding like thunder. Then Samuel did something no one expected. He sat down, cross-legged, small, defenseless. Just like Rebecca had taught Bako years ago, he began to hum the lullaby, softly, shakily, but with faith stronger than fear. The melody floated through the clearing, the same song that once soothed an orphaned gorilla through nights of terror. Bako stopped. The forest held its breath, his head tilted, recognition flickering in his dark amber eyes. He exhaled a low rumbling sound, neither threat nor comfort, something in between. Rebecca froze, whispering, "He remembers the song." Every second stretched eternity thin. Then Bako lowered himself to the ground, massive and deliberate, mirroring the boy's posture. The world seemed to exhale. Rebecca reached them, tears burning her eyes. Samuel turned slightly, whispering, "See, Mom? He knows me." Before she could speak, Bako extended his hand, palm up, the ancient gesture of trust she had taught him 17 years ago. Samuel looked at her. She nodded through the tears. Slowly, the boy placed his small hand in the gorilla's. Bako's fingers closed around it with impossible gentleness. The cameras clicked. Rangers whispered prayers. Grace murmured, "This can't be real." But it was. A true wildlife story unfolding in real time, a living testament that love remembers, even when logic doesn't. And as mother, son, and gorilla sat beneath the trembling canopy, the wild itself seemed to bow in reverence. But peace never lasts long in the places where love and memory are tested. This miracle was about to be tested in ways none of them could imagine. Weeks later, peace shattered again. Rebecca woke to an urgent call from Africa. Grace's voice trembled through the static. "Poachers. They breached the reserve last night. 3 gorillas dead, including Bako's mate." The words sliced through Rebecca's chest. "No," she whispered, sinking to the floor. "Please, not her." But the nightmare continued. "Bako's alive," Grace added, "but wounded. He won't let anyone near him. If we can't treat the infection soon, we'll lose him." Within hours, Rebecca, Daniel and Samuel were on a plane. Samuel, now 12, stared silently out the window, fists clenched. "They killed his family," he said. "We can't let him die too." His voice carried the same fierce conviction that had once driven his mother to defy the world. Daniel reached for her hand. "He's your legacy," he said softly, "but he's also our son's." When they arrived, the forest looked wounded. Charred stumps replaced trees. Silence replaced birdsong. Rangers moved like ghosts through smoke and mud. "The poachers were professionals," Grace said grimly. "They knew patrol routes, knew where the gorillas slept." Her eyes hardened. This wasn't chance. It was betrayal from inside. They tracked Bako for hours, following blood traces and broken branches. Finally, they saw him, high in the canopy, his left arm hanging limp, eyes wild with grief. He was mourning, not surviving. "He's giving up," Grace whispered. "Gorillas can die from heartbreak." Rebecca's throat tightened. "Not him," she said. "He's survived too much to stop now." Samuel stepped forward, shouting up into the trees, "Bako, please, you're not alone." For a moment, nothing. Then a low groan rumbled through the forest. Pain, loss, recognition. The sound every rescuer dreads. Rebecca felt tears burn her face. "He remembers us," she said, "but he's lost the will to fight." Grace turned. "If we can't tranquilize him soon, he'll die." Rebecca shook her head. "He won't come down for a dart. He'll only come down for trust." And so, under a bleeding sky, mother and son made a vow to reach him one last time, not as rescuers, but as family. Because sometimes the wild doesn't need science. It needs someone who refuses to stop believing that love remembers. They found Bako at sunrise, high in a tree, his breathing shallow, his wounded arm swollen and useless. Rebecca called softly, using the sounds he once knew. Nothing. His eyes flicked toward her, then away, lost in a grief deeper than pain. "He's dying from heartbreak," Grace whispered. "He's stopped fighting." But Rebecca wasn't ready to lose him. Not again. She stepped forward, ignoring warnings. "Bako," she called, "you're not alone. I kept my promise. I said I'd find you." The jungle held its breath, then a movement, small, hesitant. His eyes met hers. Recognition flickered. Behind her, Samuel whispered, "He remembers." And before she could stop him, the boy began to climb. Rebecca's heart stopped. Samuel, no. But he kept going, steady, fearless. "He trusted you, Mom. Now he needs to trust me." He reached the branch where Bako sat and spoke softly. "You saved me once. Now let us save you." Bako lifted his good arm, slowly, painfully, and extended it. Not in threat, in memory. Palm up. The same gesture Rebecca had taught him 17 years ago, the symbol of trust that had carried them both through the impossible. Rebecca climbed, tears streaming. She pressed her hands into his, whispering, "I'm here, baby. I'm here." For a moment, time stopped. The air vibrated with something holy, grief and grace colliding. Then Bako exhaled, leaned forward, and allowed her touch. The vets below moved fast, treating the wound while Rebecca kept him calm, her voice trembling with love. When it was over, Bako did something that would become legend. He wrapped one massive arm around Samuel and pulled him close, holding the boy against his chest. Cameras clicked, but no lens could capture the truth, the raw, wordless human-animal bond that transcended fear. Rebecca sobbed, whispering, "Love remembers." That image would circle the world, a wounded gorilla embracing a human child, proof that compassion is the most powerful force in nature. News outlets called it the miracle of memory. Scientists called it impossible. The world called it beautiful. Rebecca simply called it home. Years later, when she grew old, Samuel returned to Bako's forest with his own child. The gorilla, now grey and wise, approached once more, extending his hand. Samuel took it, whispering, "She was right. Love never forgets." And as man and gorilla sat together beneath the ancient trees, the forest itself seemed to breathe again, softly, reverently, because this wasn't just a gorilla rescue. It was the proof that even in a wild world, love always remembers.